So, hello everyone. This lecture is a continuation of the previous lecture on how to crack CSAT for the upcoming 2025 Civil Service exam prelims. So, if you haven't watched the previous lecture, I request you to go and watch it. First of all, who is my target audience for this particular session? Who should be even spending the next 40-50 minutes watching this? It's for those people who are pretty decent with respect to reading. What do I mean by decent with respect to reading? You should have at least for most days read Hindu newspaper in the last 1 or 2 years. Okay, you should be knowing what it means and what it feels like to read difficult passages. You should have struggled your way trying to make sense of Hindu newspaper editorials, and you should be persevering day in day after. Even though you may face difficult editorials, that should not have made you just quit and go and do something else. You should have struggled your way still trying to make sense of those editorials, right? It's only for such kind of people who are familiar with what difficult reading actually means. Maybe you may not be so sincere and regular with reading newspaper, but at least then for your optional preparation, you should have read proper textbook and not simply just depending on very simple class notes. Right? Class notes are of course easy to read, but if you have read complex textbooks, every proper literature pertinent to any specific optional, if you have gone through it, then you are familiar with what difficult written content actually means. So it's for those people who have a familiarity and who have had some kind of efforts trying to make sense of such complex written content. It's for them the next 40-50 minutes should be of use. Right? It's because I feel unlike the mathematics part of CSAT, where you can pick and choose select questions, right? There are questions which are easy. If you know how to spot them, you can definitely get some around 45 to 55 marks just from mathematics. But reading comprehension does not work like that. It works in black and white, right? Either you are good with reading comprehension, as a result of which you can get almost all the questions right, or you are not good with reading comprehension, which means that you will not even get minimum number of questions right. It's because the nature of passages are like that. If there are 10 to 13 or 14 passages given, almost all the passages are of the same quality. The level of difficulty which I find in all the passages is of the same quality, is of the same standard. So I wouldn't say that there are certain easy passages, just attempt those easy passages. No. Right? So then why do we even have this session? For those people who already know how to read, they will probably be able to perform well with reading comprehension questions, and it's for such kind of people with that target in mind I have even made the previous session where you have to spot only the easy questions of maths. That is based on the condition that you can read well so as to get the reading comprehension questions right. But if you cannot read well, if you are not used to reading good content, we will have a separate session, we will have a different session, and even that cannot be done within the next 100 days so as to make you ready for the upcoming prelims 2025. That's not going to happen. That can be a long term goal for the next 1 year, as a result of which your reading skills can be improved. So assuming that you are somebody who has been reading newspapers regularly in the last 1 year, or you know what difficult content actually means, and if you have got habituated to reading such difficult content, extracting content in the middle of all the data that you find in the Hindu editorials, and if you have been putting in such consistent efforts, then there are certain words of caution which I would like to bring to your attention through this session. Right? Yes, you know how to read, but still facing the reading comprehension questions on the day of your prelims can be slightly challenging, and there are certain reasons why I feel despite your good reading skills, still there could be a challenge in comprehending long passages or short passages, whatever the nature of questions asked. Right? So let me walk you through this session and tell you what are the challenges that you will face, and what kind of safeguards can you actually adopt, and these safeguards are the ones that you can actually keep sharpening and practicing in the upcoming days towards your prelims, so as to at least get 30 to 40 marks from reading comprehension. Right? So 30 to 40 marks in reading comprehension, and from the previous video that I have made, you will be assured of at least 40 marks. Right? Good enough to crack prelims very, very comfortably. Right? But the basic assumption is you know how to read difficult passages. Okay? So let's get into the session. As you can see on the slide, as you can see on the screen here, this is going to be the objective of the session. Right? So we have some 6 or 7 points which I would like to discuss. Basically what I want you to know is there are certain reasons why reading comprehension is perceived to be difficult, and let me first start with that. Let me give you an idea why reading comprehension questions are perceived to be difficult. I wouldn't say they are difficult, okay, but there are certain reasons why attempting it on the day of the exam becomes slightly challenging. I'll walk you through that, and then I'll give you some 4 or 5 ways of how difficult passages you will be able to make sense of that. Okay, and then there are some 2 or 3 strategies which I will give you, as a result of which difficult questions you will be able to get certain questions right. Because my way of looking into the 2024 CSAT paper and what I can infer from that is, sometimes the passages are easy, right? Just a very small passage. There are only 3-4 lines, 3-4 sentences in that passage, but the question that is asked makes handling that question becomes difficult. All the 4 options are very similar to each other, right? So do not be in the temptation that if you have a very small paragraph passage, you should simply just go and definitely attempt it and get it right. Sometimes it may not be possible. But on the other hand, then there are long passages which gives you ample amount of clues inside that, and the question that follows is simple. Okay, so the passage, the content may be very philosophical, the content may be very abstract, so you may feel it to be very challenging to read it. But the minute you finish reading the entire passage, maybe the clue lies in the last sentence of that passage. That last sentence of that passage will actually reveal to you the entire idea of that passage. But are you able to withstand, are you able to sustain going on till the end of the passage or not? Or do you feel like giving up in the middle? You know, your attention should be unwavering as you read. So these are the kind of skills, these are the kind of emotional skills that are actually needed to get reading comprehension questions right. And it's all these aspects that we'll be discussing as a part of this particular discussion, right? So let's get started and let's get into the discussion. So as you can see here on the slide, let me first give you certain reasons why reading comprehension is perceived to be difficult. I really don't think it's difficult, but there are certain reasons why it's perceived to be difficult, and first let me put it before you, and following that I'll give you different suggestions of mine as to how you can tackle complex passages. Following that, I'll give you suggestions as to how you can tackle complex questions, right? Because sometimes passages are complex, questions are easy. Sometimes passages are easy, questions are difficult, right? So you need a mix and match of all these skills so as to manage a majority of the reading comprehension questions and get them right. So let's have a look at it, what each of these ideas actually mean, right? So first, why is that reading comprehension is perceived to be difficult? What is the tricky aspect of reading comprehension? First is, you don't suffer when you perform mathematics, right? But reading comprehension, even though the passage can only be 5 sentences, the kind of words that are given, right? So sometimes what happens is, words that are given, you may not know the meaning of that. Alright, I'll show you. There are certain passages like that. So commonly these are not words that we use in our routine, in our regular vocabulary. So you may not know about it, which itself discourages you from moving forward. And let's assume you overlook that, you try to move forward, right? Almost all these passages are taken from a larger context. So it's just somewhat taken in between a larger paragraph, correct? So we don't know the head or the tail of the passage, right? We don't know in what context is all these thoughts given and where is this even leading us to. So you have to make assumptions, you have to still persevere, right? The very first sentence itself could be related to something that is preceding, which is not printed in your question paper. So unless you know what that is, it's not easy to actually even understand the very first sentence of your passage. But still you have to move on, right? And so that's what makes the reading comprehension part actually difficult. It's very exhausting, moving from one sentence to the other sentence and still trying to keep the idea of the previous sentence still coherent and intact in your memory. It is something that is sharpened through regular practice, the practice of reading complex editorials, because I feel it's the same feel that you get when you read editorials, right? Beyond the 4th and the 5th sentence, as you move on, you start feeling certain kind of pain trying to remember what you have already read, and that's exactly the pain that you will undergo when you actually go through these passages. And no wonder I said that habit of reading newspaper is very, very important to even make sense of this particular session. right? So that is what I have written here in the first 2 points here, right? It's really exhausting, okay, compared to mathematics. Mathematics is not exhausting. Just if you can only make sense of the problem, then you can start working out. Maybe you get physical exhaustion when you perform mathematics, but in reading comprehension there's a lot of mental exhaustion, correct? So even that is something that you have to train yourself to, training from maybe previous years reading comprehension passages, but that's a very small set, right? But everyday habit of reading newspapers would definitely be a very good practice, which if you have been doing, you're already in a very fit condition to tackle the RC questions, okay? And unlike mathematics, where one look at a question and you know that this is from an area which I am not strong, so let me simply just avoid this question, let me not even waste my time trying to attempt these questions. So decision making on whether you want to attempt maths questions or not, it's very easy, right? But reading comprehension is not like that. Unless you have read a passage once, twice, thrice, still hoping to go, and you still hope that by reading the questions you may make better sense of the passage. Now you start reading the questions once or twice, definitely 1.5 to 2 minutes is gone. It's only after that you are even able to make a correct choice as to whether you have to attempt it or you have to leave it, right? But 1 to 1.5 minutes that's actually gone is a valuable time that you could have spent somewhere else, correct? And I personally believe that if you are a person who simply cannot comprehend a passage and a question, and if you just leave it, it means that most of the passages you will have the same problem. Because when I went through the 2024 passage questions, I don't have a problem of comprehending the passage, but I did have a problem of figuring out which of the 4 options would probably come as the right answer for the question, right? But so many students, they feel that they have to simply overlook a question, they have to simply avoid a question because they are not able to understand it. That problem can repeat at least in 60 to 70% of the passages. You will not be able to understand, right? And imagine when mentally, emotionally, when you start thinking that many of the passages I am not able to attempt, your confidence just falls down, right? Even in the middle of the exam, you start feeling, will I even crack this year's CSAT? And that will also have its impact on other areas as well. All right. So decision making itself takes some time, whether you have to attempt a question or not. There are 2 reasons why you would not attempt a question. One is you cannot even comprehend the passage. Other reason is you feel that there are 2 options and you're not able to eliminate the wrong one and get the right one, because 2 options are so close to each other. I'll show you some questions which are of that nature, but not all the questions are like that. Only a few questions are like that, where I'm simply just not convinced about the correctness of only one option. I feel both options are equally correct. If that is the problem, then that's still manageable. So that could be another reason why you would make the decision to not go for that question. But understand, even that will take some 2 to 3 minutes of your time, right? Or at least 1 to 1.5 minutes of your time. So which means that some valuable time is spent, wasted. But whereas maths question, you see it within 5 seconds, you can make a decision not to attempt, you can just move on to the next question, right? So this wastage of time is also another reason which makes reading comprehension slightly difficult, right? So look at the 4th point. It's a real test of confidence than math questions, which I really believe it is. Okay, you may not clearly understand the first sentence, you may not understand the second sentence, there could be some difficult word in the 3rd sentence, but still proceeding further, still persevering to go to the 4th or the 5th sentence, it requires a certain level of confidence that it is still manageable. It requires a certain kind of not give up attitude, correct? So I think reading comprehension puts you to such extreme tests than mathematics. All right, because this is the kind of feel that I experienced when I went through these paragraphs, many passages. For example, there was a word given, epigram, right? I didn't know what is epigram, and this epigram would be used in the second sentence as well as the 3rd sentence. I'll show you what that passage is. So that creates a fear in my mind that, oh my God, without knowing the word epigram, will I be able to even proceed further? Will I be able to even make sense of what the passage tries to say? But yes, I have to simply overlook epigram. Everything else actually falls in place and it makes sense to me when I go to the last sentence of that passage, right? But I need that mental courage to keep persevering, even though there are problems in my comprehension of the passage. Okay, so that's what I mean by reading comprehension really tests your confidence, right? And so that's another reason why reading comprehension is perceived or it really becomes difficult. Okay, and as I've already told you in the beginning, it's a black and white skill set. Mathematics, you can pick and choose easy questions. That was what my objective of the previous lecture was, how to spot the easy questions. In mathematics, you can easily pick some 20 questions, only focus on those 20 questions. Okay, but in reading comprehension, if you are not great with reading comprehension, you cannot attempt almost any of these questions, because all the questions are of similar standards, and all the nuances which makes each passage difficult will equally apply and will equally be true with respect to the other passages as well, right? The same dynamics that goes into getting one passage right, very similar dynamics will also go into getting the other passage right. So it's a set of interconnected skills, right? So for example, there are some questions where you have to learn how to ignore the noise around the core message, and then there are some questions where I'll show you where you have to figure out the paradoxes that are there in the passages itself. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is, these are not skill set which can only be used in one passage. No, these are a similar set of skill sets, right? These are the skill sets that I have written in the first opening slide, right? So the way you limit your assumptions, the way you use elimination methods, okay, the way you function unbiased when you read a passage. These are all a set of complex interrelated skills, and same skills will be used to get almost all passage questions right. Correct? So either you have the set of skills or you don't have these skills. Correct? So that's why I believe reading comprehension is more black and white than mathematics. Mathematics, not knowing permutation, combination, work done, time taken, I can still get 40 marks from mathematics, right? But reading comprehension doesn't work like that. If you know how to read and write, if you know these interconnected skills, if you have them, if you have practiced and you have developed them, yes, you can get almost all reading comprehension questions right. But if you don't have a set of all these skills, even getting 10 marks from reading comprehension will become extremely challenging. Many mistakes will actually eliminate all the positive performance that you have with reading comprehension, right? So these are the reasons why reading comprehension questions are perceived to be slightly on the difficult side. And moreover, when you read these kind of passages, I wouldn't say you will be 100% sure about the option that you have selected. In the back of your mind, you always feel probably D can also be right. You know, that is also why I say, when you solve mathematics questions, you know that this is the right answer. You are perfectly at peace, at ease. But reading comprehension wouldn't actually give you that ease and peace, right? Still, you have to go and give the same performance question after question. And that's also another reason why I have written here that reading comprehension really tests your confidence more than mathematics part, right? It is all these traits which UPSC is testing through its reading comprehension questions. All right, so let me give you ideas about how to manage all these complex reading comprehension questions, right? Let me give you some few tips and inputs regarding that. So the first idea that I would like to tell you is, don't make a big deal about all these words, right? Because some aspirants ask me, sir, if a passage is given inference, what should I make out of it? If in some other passages the word assumptions is given, so how should I make sense of this, and how is this different from this? Well, you don't have to be too much concerned about all these useless things, okay? Because these are the similar kind of differences between examine, critically examine, analyze, assess, all these directive words that you find in mains. Actually, they don't make any difference, right? People who really perform well in mains, they are not actually concerned about all these small differences. These are the ways how a questioner can actually frame a particular question. There aren't really great difference in the way you actually go through all these directive words. Similarly, when you read your passages as well, be more concerned about your understanding of the passage than falling trap to all these kind of distractions. Don't be too obsessed about assumption versus inference. Is there some sea of difference between them? No. I am sure if you can read and comprehend the passage, when you look at the options given, your thoughts will be correctly directed so as to get the correct answer. Just because you know the dictionary meaning of the word inference versus assumption is not going to get you the answer correct for this particular question. So when you read this particular passage, what is this passage? This is the first question of 2024 prelims, CSAT, right? When you read the first passage, it actually talks about food wastage, right? In the first sentence it talks about the importance of why food is getting wasted. Second sentence it talks about its impact on environment, its impact on climate change, right? Because when you want to produce more and more, you clear a lot of forests, and whatever you have cleared, now all the food, it's going waste. So if only the food doesn't go waste, you need not even have cleared these forests in the first place. And that is all the ideas that you actually get in the first half of the passage. The last half of the passage, it simply says, addressing the loss and wastage of food in all forms is critical to complete the cycle of food sufficiency and food sustainability, right? The last closing remark of this passage is basically a reminder that it is important to ensure food wastage does not happen. That's all. Correct? So these are the basic ideas given in the passage. When you look at question number 2, it's very easy to get the first statement right, because first statement says the food distribution mechanism needs to be reimagined. It's exactly what is there in the last closing remark of the passage. But look at the second statement. Second statement says, ensuring the reduction of wastage and loss of food is a social and moral responsibility of all the citizens, right? So nowhere in the passage is the guilt, is the responsibility put on the citizens. What if the wastage is actually happening because of nature, because of climate? What if the wastage is happening because of the pests? Correct? Maybe the pests, rodents, they come and they simply eat the food crops, or it could be because of failure of the government, right? So nowhere does the passage actually pin the blame on the consumer or the farmer. Correct? So we shouldn't be making such assumptions beyond what is actually there in the passage, right? So it's very easy to fall for this trap. It's because we are used to be getting well informed on all these passage content, because when you read general studies papers, you get to know a lot of things, right? It's very easy to apply and to squeeze in all those kind of thoughts when you actually go through and when you read the questions. Try to make sure that your thoughts should be confined, your logic, your deductions should all be confined only to the content given in this particular passage, right? So that's the first idea that I would like to want to tell you. So don't be too bothered about the word assumption, inference, implication, right? Because when I went through all these passages, I was totally unmindful of all these words, right? It's after all the logic finally it's about what have I understood about the passage. From the passage, what are the options given? Correct? When you are too obsessed about inference has a different method of interpretation, assumption has a different method of interpretation, you are actually going to be distracted unnecessarily. So avoid that. Alright. So let's move on to the next insight. Next insight which I would like to actually point to you is learn how to ignore noise. What do I mean by noise? So whenever I read Hindu editorials, and whenever there is a big article, right, in the middle center page, you have this long opinion piece. And in the opinion piece, sometimes a lot of economists, they write editorials. And when they write editorials, they use a lot of data. They use data as to in the last quarter of 2024 versus this quarter of 2025, GDP has seen 3% growth beyond the 4% achieved in the last year. These are the kind of data which you don't actually need. These are data necessary for substantiation, but just to understand the core idea. What is the core idea? The GDP has actually grown compared to the previous year. Instead of simply saying that, all these data is substantiating to the idea. Correct? Sometimes what happens is all these kind of numbers and data and all these substantiations that are actually given, it exhausts you, right? And finally, when you come to the question, you will understand all the data that is there in the passage is actually unnecessary to get this question right. Right? Let me prove it to you. This is a passage that was asked in the last year. Okay, let's go through the passage. By the time children reach class 8, bulk of them tend to be in the age range of 13 years to 15 years. Right? So if you are too obsessed with the facts, immediately you start trying to remember all these facts. So what do? Oh, class 8 students, many of them are within the range of 13 to 15 years of age. You start writing it down. Next, but in our country, about a quarter of all children, so 25% of the children in our country in class 8, they struggle with reading texts, and more than half are still unable to do. So which means more than half. Okay, more than half is 50%. 50% are still unable to do simple text, basic arithmetic operations like division. right? Too much of facts. You cannot actually remember all these facts. So for a moment, let us just ignore all these facts, right? Let's forget about all these facts and let's just keep on reading one sentence after the other. So what does the passage now say? Children, by the time they reach class 8, many of them have a particular age. Okay, let's forget about that age. So by class 8, children cannot read simple text. Children cannot do basic arithmetic operations like division. That's all. Very simple idea. By the time children reach class 8, many of them are not able to do simple reading, simple mathematics, right? Every year about 25 million young boys, okay, let's forget about the number. Every year young boys and girls from elementary school move into life that lies for them beyond compulsory schooling. Okay, fine, that's a simple normal idea. They cannot enter the workforce, at least in the organized sector, till they are 18 years of age. Oh, okay, fine. For many families, these children are the first from their families ever to get this far in the school. Okay, parents and children expect that such graduates from school, okay, will go on to high school and college. Hardly anyone wants to go back to agriculture. On the other hand, abilities in terms of academic competencies are far lower than they should be, even based on curricular expectations of class 8. Fine. What I am able to make sense of this passage is that so we take a particular reference point. The reference point is class 8, right? So a lot of children go to class 8. By the time they go to class 8, they are not having the basic reading and writing ability. And after this, many of the students, they drop out of the schools. They even though they drop out, they don't become a part of the workforce, right? Because only at 18 years of age, after 18 years, you can become a part of workforce. So what are they doing in between? Parents and children expect that such graduates from school will go on to high school and college. Okay, and many of these children are just their first in their families to even get education, right? And these children, they are not even going into agriculture also. Okay, so entire passage blames a lot of things. The core of the passage is basically, it says children are useless. School education is not giving them the right skills. That's all. Now look at the statement given. Based on the above passage, the following assumptions have been made. For effective school educations, parents have greater role than the governments. Nowhere is it given, and moreover it said that these are first generation graduates. They are the first to go to school from their families, correct? So why would parents have a greater role to play than the governments to improve the quality of school education? No way. So first statement should be eliminated. And similarly, look at the statement 2. Statement 2 says school curriculum that conforms to today's requirements and is uniform for entire country may address the issues brought about. There are two problems in this particular statement, right? One is it blames the curriculum. Second is it blames as if some states are performing well and some states are not performing well, and both these assumptions are wrong, right? If you read the entire passage, there is nothing that's pointed out as if the curriculum that is actually taught in the schools are wrong. It only says that school children are not able to achieve competencies which are there in the curriculum. So the problem is maybe in the teaching, or the problem could be in the form of students' attendance in the classes. There is nothing that's wrong or problematic about the school curriculum. Okay, so the second statement, which actually makes this assumption that school curriculum that conforms to today's requirements. Why should we even make that assumption? What makes us think that the curriculum is not in tune with today's requirements? Maybe if the passage would have been slightly different, if it says that a lot of children are unemployable because they don't have the right skills, so industries don't recruit them, if those kind of messages are there in the passage, then probably you can actually blame it on the school curriculum. Whereas here in the passage, there is nothing that is actually blamed on the content that is actually taught to the children. It only points out children don't have a required skill set, right? So the second statement is also incorrect. First statement is also incorrect. Now neither 1 or 2 is the correct answer, right? So leave the correct answer here. The point I am trying to simply emphasize is all the data that you find in the passage about class 8, about 13 to 15 years, 25% of them, 50% cannot write, 25% cannot speak. All of these data have now proved to be useless to getting question number 21 right. But if you are someone who starts taking all these data as you read very, very serious, you will not be able to make much progress in swiftly reading the passage, and you are exhausted because you tend to retain too much of data when you actually go through the content, right? That also becomes very discouraging to confidently go forward when you read the passage, right? When you do the first reading, whenever you come across all these datas, just ignore the data, right? And now you can come to the question, and if in the question there is a requirement of data, if the question, which I don't think UPSC has ever done it, right? In the reading comprehension questions, UPSC is not going to ask 25% of the reading of the children cannot read, 75% of the children cannot write. UPSC is not going to play with respect to all these numbers and datas, right? So that is why when you read the passage, when you come across data, simply learn how to ignore and proceed forward with reading between the lines. That will be a much more essential skill set that you need, right? And look at the next follow-on question, question number 22. Which one of the following statements best reflects the central idea conveyed by the passage, right? Total eradication of poverty in the country will resolve the issue of underperformance. There is nothing mentioned about poverty in the entire passage. And the passage says eradication poverty will resolve the issue of underperformance of our school children. No. At least if the passage says that children have to be employed in agriculture because they have to be the breadwinners of the family, we can start assuming that, okay, because they are poor, they have to start working, and no wonder their attendance in school falls. Even that is not given in the passage. Passage says nobody even goes to agriculture also. Correct? So poverty may not be the reason. It could be because of the lack of interest. It could be because of incorrect methodology in which it is taught to, so that students don't even feel interested to attend the lectures. Any other reason, but poverty cannot be the reason because it's not pointed out in the paragraph as the reason, right? Monetary incentives to parents and teachers is a strategy to improve children's academic performance. Again, that's the same logic. Poverty is not the reason, and so we cannot even make assumptions that the parents are poor, right? It's only when such assumptions can be made, when such conclusions can be made, we can then say yes, by incentivizing them with money, maybe parents can be induced to send their children to school. But nowhere in the passage is the problem of money pointed out as the reason for underachievement in academics. So first and second, both of these are incorrect. And public policy should ensure that competencies and achievements of young people are aligned with their expectation. Okay, seems to be right. And fourth option is India is not going to take advantage of the demographic dividend unless some school pass outs go back to agriculture. No, this is also incorrect. So it's very easy, right? See, the question is actually easy. Passage is also easy. You can make sense of it. Question also it's easy because you can clearly differentiate between the options and arrive at the right answer. Right? This is actually easy passage only if you can learn how to ignore all the data and ignore the noise. Right? So ignoring this data and noise is important to get these two questions right. But if you are too bothered about the data, your time will get wasted. You will feel exhausted by the time you come to these even statements. So this is an easy question. When you get all these easy questions, make it even more easier by ignoring all these data and noise. In fact, I would say both the two questions can be got right. All right. So let's move on to the next question. Next idea. So this is a passage, and I have already given you a hint of this passage when I was giving the opening remarks of this lecture, right? I told you a word called epigram which was there in the passage. It is this particular passage, right? Look at what the passage is. Let's just simply read it. History of science is the history of mankind. So this is a quote that is given. In this striking epigram, a 19th century writer links science with its background. So I can understand epigram means probably a quote, correct? Though I don't know the exact meaning of the word epigram, but that's not going to shake my confidence, right? I can understand, okay, epigram probably refers to a quote. Okay, like most epigrams, its power lies in emphasizing by contrast an aspect of truth which may easily be overlooked. Okay, so it seems like epigrams have some common characteristic to them, right? Let me not be worried about too much about all of these things. Right, I find the interpretation of this third sentence slightly difficult. Like most epigrams, its power lies in emphasizing by contrast an aspect of truth which may easily be overlooked. Right, I am not able to really, though I can understand what the sentence is trying to say, I am not able to connect what is its utility in the preceding idea or in the succeeding idea. So I have to go and read the succeeding idea. So let me read what is there in the next sentence. In this case, it is easy to overlook the relationship between science and mankind, and to treat the former, what is former, science, as some abstract third party which can sometimes be praised for its beneficial influence but frequently and conveniently blamed for the horrors of war. Right? What is this entire sentence talking about? It says that it's very, very easy to de-link science from humanity. Right? We tend to often de-link science from human beings, and we treat it as a third party, something very unrelated. Sometimes we stand alone, we praise science for all its beneficial impact, but whenever there is war happening and when we see a lot of destruction happening, then we start blaming science. Right? All that is actually the core of this particular sentence is that we human beings often tend to de-link science from human beings. That's the whole idea. Right? So next sentence says, science and mankind cannot be divorced from time to time at men's convenience. So it is actually scolding. It's actually a word of caution which says that though we tend to de-link, it cannot be done. It should not be done. That is what is said here. Yet we have seen that in spite of countless opportunities of improvement, the opening years of the present period of civilization have been dominated by international conflict. Okay. So this is actually something different. This is not to do with science. This is not to do with humanity. It's another idea that is being conveyed to us, that we have seen in the even though we could have improved upon international relations, we could have improved upon relationship between two nations, we have seen that in the recent years, we have seen that there is a lot of conflict. Okay. Is this the inevitable result of progress of science, or does the fault lie elsewhere? Okay. Let me revisit all the ideas. The first sentence says, history of science is the real history of mankind. Okay, the real history of science is the real history of mankind. So it's a sweeping statement. It says that the history of human beings is nothing but the history of science. So as science progresses, we create history. So it's actually pointing out as if science is the reason why human history itself has happened. So too much emphasis is what is given in the first sentence on the importance of science, right? But the second sentence moderates. Okay, second and third sentence, right? The third sentence especially, it says that like most epigrams, this quote is what is an epigram. Its power lies in emphasizing by contrast an aspect of truth which may be easily overlooked, which means that now I am able to make sense of it. After reading the entire passage, I am able to actually make slow sense of it, saying that because why? When I came to the last sentence of this passage, there is a question mark that is raised. What is the question mark? The question mark raised is the problems that is happening between the countries. Can it be pointed to science, or does the fault lie elsewhere? Right? It's actually very paradoxical idea to that is there in the first sentence. First sentence, it says history of science is what is the history of human beings. So which means that the last line should be making this conclusion that all the international conflict is only because of science. But is that what is happening? No. The last sentence is raising a very big question mark. Can we say it on science, or can it be blamed on something else? Which means that the passage is not trying to give importance excessively on the role of science. But isn't that what is happening in the first line? Now I am able to understand that there are very conflicting, paradoxical ideas that is here. Right? When I get sense of that particular thought, now when I read that one particular sentence which I couldn't really comprehend, look at the third sentence. Like most epigrams, its power lies in emphasizing by contrast an aspect of truth which is actually overlooked. Right? So what it's trying to say is the history of science is the real history of mankind could be an exaggeration. It could be the result of overlooking something else. Correct? That is what I am able to understand. Right? So I hope you are able to follow it. What I am simply trying to say is, when you start reading this passage, you feel as if, oh, science is the greatest aspect. Science is what actually human beings' history itself has been caused because of what science and its development has been. Right? But as you keep on reading more and more, as you go towards the concluding part of the passage, now your entire belief on the importance of science feels to be exaggerated. And that is very much confirmed when you go to the last line of this passage, when the author asks you a question: is this entire international relations the result of science, or can it be attributed on something else? So which means that passage concludes by negating the importance and the influence of science in creating history, right? So that's the whole idea about this particular paragraph, right? So what is the message that I have pointed out to you here? Don't give up while reading passages. Clues may lie towards the end. Yes, when I started first reading this paragraph, I'm not able to make sense of even the second and the third sentence. First, I don't even know the meaning of the word epigram, right? And when I go to the third sentence is very, very tricky and confusing. But I don't get bogged down. I don't stop in the third sentence. I don't start wondering what should I make sense of the third sentence. Instead, with a calm, cool mind, I still try to read more and more. And as I go towards the concluding remarks, concluding part of the passage, now my understanding is actually clear. With that, I am able to now look at third sentence, and I may be able to understand what epigram is actually doing, what the author is saying as the role of epigrams, right? What is he pointing at the flaw of these epigrams? What the author says is these epigrams are conveniently overlooking another side of the story. That's the summary, right? The author says, like all other epigrams, this epigram as well conveniently overlooks an aspect of truth. Okay, that truth is that other aspect that not only science creates human history, but also human beings are the ones who create scientific history. How science evolves, what is the advantages and disadvantages of science, what is the use to which it will be put to. That is also something that is vice versa influenced by the role of human beings, and that is the part of the truth which the author says this epigram conveniently overlooks. Alright, now I hope I have made sense. Look at the statements given. 31. Which of the following are conveyed by the author of the passage? Even the word emphatically, may not know the meaning of the word emphatically, but just understand what is the message conveyed by the author of the passage, right? Without science, mankind could not have continued to exist till today, right? Which is basically not the idea that the author is trying to convey, because he is really raising a question: is science so powerful, or does it depend on something else, right? And moreover, throughout the passage, the author has been repeatedly pointing out that let us not exaggerate the role of science. So which means that the first statement is completely opposite to the idea conveyed in the passage. Second, it is science that will ultimately determine the destiny of mankind. Though when you read the first sentence, it may give you that impression that history of science is the real history of mankind. If you are not able to understand the core message that the author is trying to negate his own idea, you will otherwise go and choose second statement as right option, which is not the case. The entire passage says science need not be exaggerated. So it is a science that will ultimately determine the destiny of mankind. It is wrong. First statement is wrong. Neither 1 nor 2 is the correct answer. Correct? So a lot of aspirants, let's say this is the 31st question. Let's say you have been thinking all the previous reading comprehension questions have all been difficult. Let us say you have skipped attempting all those questions, and when you come to this, now you feel the first sentence is history of science is the real history of mankind, right? With that limited knowledge, if you cannot understand other parts of the passage, now you start assuming that, okay, so author says science is all about what shapes the history of mankind. And now what you do, you will look at question number or statement number 2. It is science that will ultimately determine the destiny of mankind. So with this wrong notion, wrong understanding of what the passage tries to say, just verbatim you look at the first part of the passage, you feel that, oh, it's correct, and you will just go for option number 2 as right answer, right? So that is why difficult passages need not actually be difficult. You may feel the difficulty somewhere in the middle of the passage, but as you move on and on, as you come towards the closing part of the passage, the entire original correct meaning of the passage will make sense to you, right? Until I came to the last sentence where the author raises the question, can it be pointed to science or the fault lies elsewhere? Now I am able to understand that the author doesn't want to portray excessive importance to science, correct? Until then I did not get that right idea, right? So that's why you shouldn't give up. There could be complexities, there could be areas where you might not make sense, but just push, keep going on. All right. So and once you have done it, you don't have to know the meaning of the word epigram, you don't have to know the meaning of this word emphatically conveyed, all of that, right? You just need to understand this core that the author himself raises a big question mark on the utility of science. 32. Based on the above passage, the following assumptions have been made. The horrors of modern life are inevitable result of the progress of science. That is a question mark. That is what exactly the author raises as a question. So first statement is wrong. The aspect of truth likely to be overlooked is that science is what man has made it. Exactly, right? Because the statement says mankind is what science has made out of it. But then the author in the third sentence, he says, like all other epigrams, it is only a part of the truth. It is overlooking the other part of the truth. And then he goes on with further discussion. The second statement is actually right, because the author is giving the counter narrative that human history is not what science has made. Even the progress of science is also what human beings have made. Right? That is the you can only get this second statement right if you are able to understand the original mood of the author from the last paragraph, last part of this passage, and then you, with that knowledge, if you can apply that to the third sentence, when you link all of that, only then you can actually make sense of this particular passage. Only then you can get the second statement right. 2 only is the right answer. Right? So it requires a certain level of reading skills. It's not so easy. Okay, so who knows, the same skill that you should not give up while you read. As you can see, it's helpful to me not only getting this particular passage right, even in the previous passage I did not give up, even when there is a lot of noise, when there is a lot of numbers and data. It feels like I should be giving up, but I did not. Right? So that's why I said in the opening part of this lecture that many of the skills are interconnected. You cannot say only one passage requires a particular skill, other passage requires another skill. Not giving up attitude, ignoring noise, all of these are not giving up despite you face difficulties. Right? Like the way I face difficulty, not able to make sense of the word epigram and all of that. The third sentence I can actually not make sense and connect to any of the passage, but still I went on. Right? So interconnected skills you require to get reading comprehension questions right. All right. So this is another skill that I would like to emphasize here. All right. Look at the 33rd question. I have simply brought it to you here to tell you why I would be skipping question number 33. Right. So you can understand what is the logic behind this. It's a very, very small passage. You see, just so small, just like the science and history and all that. Right. So only with long experience and opening of his wares on many a beach where his language is not spoken, will the merchant come to know the worth of what he carries and what is parochial and what is universal in his choice. Right? It's framed in a very difficult way. Just visualize it. Right? Let's say a merchant is carrying a basket. He has a lot of goods in that, and he feels that each good is worth 10,000 rupees. Right? It's in his mind. But the minute he goes to a real market, to a particular country, he opens that. Now people come and ask it for 100 rupees, 200 rupees. That is exactly what is actually conveyed here. Right? Only with long experience and opening of his wares. Ware is what? Silverware, enamelware. Right? So it's basically goods. On many a beach where his language is not spoken. So a merchant carrying his items, foreign country, opening his basket, unveils his goods. People come, purchase it at a very low price than what the merchant actually thought he can probably fetch for his products. Right? This is what is conveyed. Such delicate goods such as justice, love, honor, courtesy, and indeed all the things that we care for are valid everywhere. Right? But they are variously molded and often differently handled and sometimes nearly unrecognizable if you met them in a foreign land. And the art of learning fundamental common values is perhaps the greatest gain of travel to those who wish to live at ease among their fellows. You see, it's a very compound sentence, too long, but the meaning is not so compound. Right? Again, this reinforces my thought why you should be reading newspaper editorials regularly, because you have long editorials, long sentences, compound sentences. Right? The stamina that you gain sustaining the reading of such long sentences can help you retain the stamina when you undergo the reading of all these long sentences. Right? There are just 2 sentences here in this entire passage. First sentence talks about what you value versus what you actually get. Right? Basically, you may think so highly of yourself, your products, but in the real market it may not actually be so greatly valued. It talks about this mismatch. Right? But at the same time, the second sentence says there are certain common ideas like justice, honor, courtesy, right? And these ideas are valued everywhere, whether you are in America or in India or London, everywhere these ideas like courtesy and justice, they have their value, correct? But how, and they are all found everywhere, they are practiced everywhere, but how do they manifest is different, right? Courtesy in India could be very different, like like touching the feet of your elder ones in your family, right? That may not even happen in America, right? But that doesn't mean that there is no respect for elderly in US, correct? So understand that this second part of this paragraph is simply trying to say that there are some common values that are found everywhere, right? But the way in which it is exhibited, the way in which it is practiced may actually differ from place to place, right? So the last closing remarks of this passage, what does it say? The art of learning these common values everywhere can help a person live at ease with his fellow beings, right? So let's say a friend of mine from America, he comes here, he doesn't fall on my father's feet, he doesn't touch my father's feet, but that need not be interpreted as if he is disrespecting me, right? So once you know that his actions may not conform to your expectations, but still you know the real intent behind those actions, you don't actually have anything to be angry at him. So which means that you can live at peace with your friend who comes from America, right? That's all. Just three imaginations. One, a man carries his product to a distant land, he feels his products to be greatly valued, but in the foreign land it's not so valued. It talks about relativity, it talks about difference in perceptions, right? Second part says that there are common values everywhere, but it's manifested differently. And once you understand that it is manifested differently, you will be able to live a peaceful life amongst your fellow human beings. That's all. Right, now let's look at the question. When we meet other people while we travel, we learn to differentiate between, right? And there are 4 options given. Option B and option D can be just struck down. It's totally absurd. I request you to also have a look at question number 33. And if you're watching this video till this point, give me a comment, right? Drop in the comment which one do you think is the right option, because I am confused between option A and option C, right? A direct reading of the paragraph says that we will be able to differentiate between values that they are not only held in your locality, but they are also valued even in America or England as well, like values like respect, justice and all of that, right? So question number 33, local values and universal values. Yes, you may be able to differentiate that. You may be able to understand that, okay, in America they have a different set of values, though they have some common values, right? Yes, but at the same time, the first part of the paragraph, it also says that only when you go out, you will be able to understand the things that you value, whether they are really valued elsewhere or not, right? So you may be under your imagination, but in reality there could be something else. Okay, so that's why option A and option C seem to be very close to each other, and I feel like better I avoid this, okay, because both of the statements appear to be correct to me. Alright, so when you read this passage, you may drop a comment as to what you feel is the right choice here. Question number 34 is easy. 2 questions follow this particular passage. One seems to be difficult, the other one seems to be really easy. Alright, see, another idea that I would like to tell you here is, if you're not so good with reading comprehension, maybe, right, you feel you're not as comfortable with reading comprehension, I'll tell you, these kind of philosophical passages are slightly challenging compared to other general kind of passages like food wastage. That's the first passage. The second passage is about how many children are getting educated and what is the skill set that they have, right? So that is the second passage. These are all general studies, very much all of us are exposed to these kind of ideas. But when you come to these kind of very abstract, indirect way of saying the core content, you know, there are these kind of passages as well. So if at all you feel you can take a risk in attempting these passages, I would suggest you to take a risk in attempting these kind of passages rather than unnecessarily risking it in these passages. Okay, this is for those people who are not very strong with reading ability, right? Because these passages, it requires to get that one particular aspect should be got right, that core should be got right, and the core is represented in various metaphors and indirect representations. It's not openly said, right? Look at the way the second passage says, only when a traveler takes his goods to a different place he knows the worth of what he actually carries, right? A very indirect way of coming to the core idea. So these kind of passages may be tricky to get the answers right compared to the previous set of passages. So the upcoming 2025 prelims, if you feel like risking it or taking a risk, I would say you try to do that in the former category and not this type of passages. Alright, but in my opinion, this is also possible. Alright, fine, we move on to the next. There's another question which I really want to solve so as to tell you that the words that are given in the options in the question actually can help you in getting the answers right. Right? Look at this particular passage 2. The flower was not invented to please us. It flaunted its petals and spread its perfume to attract an insect. The insect carries the pollen from flower to flower so that pollen is not carried away by wind and thus not wasted. Right? What we call a flower's beauty is merely a byproduct and human invention. The perfume is not there to please us, it pleases us because it is there and we have been conditioned to it. Right? So just one reading of this passage, what am I able to understand? That there is a flower has a good fragrance to it, it has very beautiful petals, as a result of which it attracts the insect carries the pollen from one flower to the other, and the author says it is created so beautiful so that the insect can carry the pollen, otherwise what will happen is wind will come and all the pollen will be wasted. Right? And the second half of the passage says the way we look at flower and we call beautiful is not because nature has created flower for you to feel beautiful. You are conditioned as a human being appreciating beauty, and when you look at flower you also feel it's beautiful as well. Right? These are the two ideas. One side we have the reason for flower's beauty. The reason is because not for a human to feel its beauty, it's enticing so that an insect can actually pollinate it so as to better utilize its pollen. Second part talks about human conditioning. Right? Now look at the question. Based on the above passage, the following assumptions have been made. There are two statements given. Right? I'll come to the first statement. Second statement, the author of the passage does not believe in the usefulness of flowers except as things of beauty. Right? Author of the passage does not believe, so it means that author says flowers are useless except as things of beauty, but that is not what the second part of the passage says. Second part says you human beings have started feeling it beautiful, but nature did not really create it beautiful for a purpose of a human being. So it's exactly the opposite. Right? Second statement is wrong. Flowers are actually useful so that the insects can pollinate it, the way it is perfumed, the way it is very beautiful to see. It's for so many other reasons, not for a human being. It's not as a thing of beauty. It's not for a human being to feel happy about looking at a flower. It's about an insect, so that the insect can go and pollinate it. Right? So second statement is exactly the opposite idea. Look at the first statement. Author of the passage believes that flowers are creations of nature's luxury. Okay, the nature doesn't seem to be luxuriant enough here. It feels that a flower has to somehow pollinate. Right? A flower should not go wasted. That is why it's so beautiful to attract an insect so that the insect can go and pollinate it and lead to more and more flowers getting born. If the nature is so luxuriant about it, the nature wouldn't care about its beauty of the flower. Nature knows there are hundreds of such similar species of flowers. Some of them wind can pollinate it, and maybe there could be a rare, there could be some perpetuation of the species. But that doesn't seem to be the case here. The case here seems to be where nature is very, very, very concerned that even this particular one flower should also perpetuate itself. Right? So you should not immediately go and look for the word, oh, nature's luxury is not here. Understand what is the meaning of the word luxury, luxuriant. Luxury is plentiful. Right? If you have 100 flowers plentiful, one of that can possibly be pollinated even when the wind blows. Right? If that is the case, then nature would not have created such beautiful flower. It has made the flower beautiful so that Even every flower's pollen is properly utilized. So it's opposite to the idea of luxury, right? So this is wrong, so neither 1 or 2 is the correct answer, right? So don't think that I have chosen this particular statement, I have gone for option D as the right answer because I didn't find the word luxury anywhere. No, I am interpreting the meaning or idea of what luxury is, right? So start interpreting, give meaning to these words. Don't keep exactly looking for that. Who knows, UPSC can twist it, right? It can actually make the third sentence with the word nature is luxuriant in other ways, and you may think that okay, nature, luxury is there, so it's actually correct answer, right? Do not be very what do I say, very unthoughtful, right? Use your brain, use your thinking to understand what luxury would actually mean, and then go for the statement as correct or wrong. Okay, so these are all the different ideas that I would be using to get the reading comprehension questions right. Though I have pointed out one particular idea being used in each one of these paragraphs, but I believe it's a set of these ideas, it's a combination of these ideas which will be actually be useful in the real exam to get most of these questions right. Because even though I may say that in some question the clue lies else in the towards the end, when I looked at the option, even elimination also could have been used. So it's like 2 or 3 different ideas being used to arrive at the right answer, correct? It's just to teach you. I had taken a particular passage and I have brought out the most useful skill out of these passages. That doesn't mean that just with that one skill alone the passage has been got right. It's a multiple different skill set which has all gone into getting these passages right. And at the same time, I will also show you 2 passages which I was very reluctant to attempt, which I am really scared to attempt because I feel I may make a mistake, right? Let us see what those passages actually are. 51st question. Look at this, and these are questions which are very, very short passages, just 2 sentences and the passage is over, right? So I'll tell you what my problem is when I read these passages. Passages are easy, but the question, the way the options are framed actually made it very, very difficult for me to handle these questions very confidently, and let me tell you why. When an international team of scientists pumped carbon dioxide and water mixture into underground basalt rocks, basic chemistry took over. Anybody can understand that. Acidic mixture dissolved rocks, calcium and magnesium, and it formed limestone. Basically, carbon dioxide is converted into stone, exclaimed the scientists. Alright. So, which of the following statements best reflects the most logical, rational and practical suggestion implied by the passage? Right. Let's look at it. It is a cheap and practical method to produce limestone at commercial level for building purposes. This can be eliminated. None of this. Nowhere is the passage talking about this as a cheap method. Nowhere in the passage is this mentioned that limestone is commercially obtained from this method for building purposes, right? Eliminating option A is easy. Now looking at B, C, D, this can be used as one of the methods of carbon sequestration, right? But the problem is carbon sequestration is not actually directly given in the passage. Of course, carbon dioxide is converted into stone, so it's a way of fixing carbon dioxide. I have no doubt about that. But should I expand my thinking even beyond this passage to include this new word carbon sequestration or not? That's a big question that I have. And not only that, next, basalt rock can be made a good source of calcium and magnesium minerals by this method. Even that seems to be right, because when you pour carbon dioxide water mixture into basalt rocks, the rocks got dissolved and calcium and magnesium were formed, right? So even this statement seems to be right. Basalt rock can be made as a good source of calcium and magnesium minerals by this method. If I can assume that this can be a very good method of carbon sequestration, expanding this thought to some idea which is not even there in the passage, why should I similarly not assume that, oh yes, this method can even be used to produce calcium and magnesium, right? So even this seems to be right, this seems to be right. And next, good rock dissolving acid can be produced by mixing carbon dioxide and water. Yes, even this seems to be true, right, because the acid that was formed has actually dissolved the rocks. So even this option seems to be correct. So it feels like as if all the three appears to be right. I'm not really able to differentiate which is the best and the logical and the practical suggestion here, right, because all three has some kind of utility. In one method I can trap carbon, in another method I can probably get calcium and magnesium, and in another method I can get rock dissolving acid, and in the other option good rock dissolving acid seems to be getting produced, right. So I am just simply scared of not being able to differentiate between three options. This adds to my discomfort. Okay, so I just feel like skipping this question unattempted. And moreover, if only the passage was big, there will be more things to infer from the passage, right. I've shown you where even more complicated passages, where even more difficult worded passages, I was able to decipher some things out. But it looks like an easy passage, but the length of the passage is too short that on the spot, on the day of the exam, sitting on the hot seat, I may not be able to think and differentiate correctly between these three options, right. So that's why I feel it's better to skip this question unattempted. The chances of going wrong seems to be higher. At least if I could have eliminated two options, then probably yes, I may have tried making a guess, at least 50%. Here three options I am not able to actually eliminate. And same is the case with the other passage as well. Look, so I believe I have given you an idea about how to handle reading comprehension questions. So to summarize it, I would tell you this: there are only two types of questions which even if you don't attempt, I can accept it, and that is if the passage is very philosophical and abstract, correct. So which requires a very philosophical way of thinking, correct. So abstract ideas, if you afford to skip it, okay, forgivable. Whereas short passages but with questions where the options, two or more than two options, seem to be very close to each other, yes, you can leave it unattempted, because actually you don't spend more amount of time reading that small passage, right. Not much time is spent. Whereas when it comes to passages which are very philosophical and abstract, a lot of time actually gets spent, right. So as soon as you see the passage, when you feel it's too philosophical and spiritual, and if you feel that you are not having the strength, capability to attempt those passages, it's okay to leave it unattempted. These are the only two excuses and the reasons for you to leave passages unattempted. Do not leave other passages unattempted. You have to make sure the rest of the passages, maybe 60 to 70% of the other passages, you have to just go and get almost all of them correct, right. You only simply have to be logical. You need to have all these skills of observing the passage correctly, using elimination, right. Even if when you think logically, you will be able to eliminate the two weird and absurd options, right. I have shown you so many exercises where I have eliminated certain options to arrive at the right answer, correct. So it's a mix of all these skill set. Elimination is necessary, and in addition to that, you should know how to ignore the noise and the data and the burdening information that is there in the passage. You should know how to just filter all those useless ideas, only focus on the essentials, right. So eliminate noise, look into the essentials, and persevere. Do not give up, right. The first 2-3 sentences might appear to be difficult. It may appear as if you may not end up getting the answers correct at all, but as you move closer and closer towards the end, who knows, you may be able to finally make out the meaning and the content of the entire passage, right. So this is what I feel is the takeaways from today's session, all right. And for those who have just watched the session for the first time, if you would want to have more ideas about the maths part of CSAT, you can check out the playlist, and the video just before this video has answers to that, all right. So thank you.